The 2022 MLB season is officially underway, and there are some big-name players who have struggled in the past few years. Will they rebound this year, or will their legacy and their card prices fade? Let's find out in today's Data Dive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another Data Dive. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot, and it's finally baseball season. I drafted my fantasy team, and I can't wait to track all the statistics for the next 6 months. Now, as I was preparing for my draft, I noticed several players in the top 100 preseason ranks who struggled last year. So it's always a gamble. Do you bank on them having a rebound season, or will their struggles continue? And that's what prompted the thought for today's episode. I love playing fantasy because it helps me keep track of the market and think about the short-term card market as well. So let's take a look at 5 players who will be looking to get back into form in 2022. But before we do that, as always, this episode is brought to you by Market Movers, now with a super fast and super accurate image recognition for graded cards. Try it out for free on our mobile app. And for the full web and mobile experience, visit marketmoversapp.com and use promo code TRIAL to start your free 7-day trial. All right, so before we get into this, obviously disclaimer as always, these are not card picks. I'm not telling you who to buy, what players or what cards to buy. I'm simply explaining things that I like to take into consideration when I'm thinking about this, my thought process. And specifically, I'm focusing on this MLB season, the 2022 season. This is not about long-term holds. This isn't about, buying these players or cards for the long term. This is specifically about the 2022 season. Now, some key investment considerations for slumping players when you're looking at players who have been struggling and might be looking for a rebound. 1, what's the historical precedent? Is there a track record of success? Do they have some proven consistency over time? And maybe it was just a fluke that they struggled in the last year or two. Playoff probability, check the Vegas odds for likelihood to make the playoffs, likelihood to make the World Series. That's really important. Team success is not as important for baseball as it can be for other sports, but it can have certainly play into a factor. And when teams get into contention in the playoffs, you can certainly see a spike in their prices. And finally, injury probability. What is their likelihood to actually be on the field? Obviously, the prices are going to go down in a season on any player who's out for the season or out and not actually playing. So first up, you can't talk about baseball without talking about Mike Trout. Obviously, an incredible resume, probably the most impressive resume in many, many, many years and several decades. 3-time AL MVP, 4-time AL MVP runner-up, top 5 in the other 2 in the MVP voting. Rookie of the Year, 9-time All-Star, 8-time Silver Slugger. There's not a lot you can't say about Mike Trout other than the fact that he hasn't won a World Series yet. Now, if Mike Trout can play this season, the Angels could be competitive. So, looking at his card prices last 180, Trout is actually flat. 0% movement on his card prices collectively over the last 180 days. Yahoo has him in their preseason rank at number 15 overall. And in terms of where he finished last year in his final ranking for the 2021 season, he was 715, and that's largely because he didn't play. Just 36 games played last year, and when he did play to start the season, he was crushing it. He was having one of his best seasons yet, a 1.090 OPS, and had already hit 8 home runs in 36 games. He was having a typical Trout season. If you go to the season before that, that was the shortened 2020 season, so these stats are going to look a little funny as we compare them. But that was just a 60-game season of which he played 53, so still not a full season. In the season before that, 2019, 134 games played, but he had an incredible season, 45 home runs in just 134 games. Obviously an impressive OPS still, and a WAR of almost 8. Again, still having missed 28 games in that season. So, 31 games. So if we scroll down here, the things that I'm looking at that I talked about, historical precedent. Trout, again, better than anybody. He's got the precedent. It's really just a question of him being healthy and making the playoffs. Now, if Trout's healthy, if Ohtani repeats what he did, if the pitching for the Angels can get it together, if Anthony Rendon can play halfway decent, if Joe Adell has a breakout season, all of these big ifs, the Angels could be a team that could contend. Their World Series probability, not great. I'm giving that a yellow light, plus 3,500. I looked specifically at World Series probability to win the World Series. So they're about middle of the road in terms of all the leagues in Major League Baseball. Injury prone, I gave him an orange. Last season was a bit of an anomaly in that he missed most of the season, but historically he does miss some percentage, 10, 15, 20% of the games played. And so all of that stacks up into terms of what's his actual rebound probability. I'm giving it a yellow light, kind of middle of the road. This is, again, just a question of whether or not Trout's going to be on the field. If he is, you have to think it's going to be super impressive and that everybody's going to start caring again about Mike Trout's card prices. So let's jump over and just take a look at some of his cards. These are his rookie cards in PSA 10. And again, I'm on last 180 days, and you can see there's movement on some of these, right? We were averaging it out for 0%, but if I scroll down, it does look like his Bowman Platinum cards have gotten some traction. Continuing to scroll down, you can see obviously his, kind of flagship Topps Update rookie card, PSA 10, up 13% in the last 180 days. And if we keep scrolling down, you can see some of his other cards, down in the negative, down in the red, some of his Diamond Anniversary cards and other ones. So I just chose, PSA 10 because that makes comparing apples to apples clean here. But obviously Trout is a guy that a lot of people have invested money into. You're gonna see, like, for example, if I scroll up and look at that, flagship Trout card, the rookie, I think it was around $500,000 in sales. Let's keep scrolling up. Yeah, $556,000 in sales just for that card in the last 180 days. So there are a lot of people with money invested into Trout and a lot of people holding their breath, hoping that he can continue to have an incredible career from here until whenever he hangs up his cleats. So let's jump back and look at the next player. Similar to Trout, Mookie Betts. This is a guy who has kind of been, I don't want to say in Trout's shadow. He's moved over to the National League now, so you could have a season where, Betts and Trout both compete for the MVP in the same season. But Betts is another guy who, if you're thinking about WAR, wins above replacement, he's the guy that comes up second only to probably Trout over the last, 5, 6, 7 years. His card price is down 14% in the last 180 days. Obviously, there was probably a bit of a run-up, with the Dodgers last year pushing toward the World Series, which they obviously did not make in spite of being heavy favorites. Yahoo preseason rankings have him at number 10 overall, whereas he finished 101st in the rankings last year. So let's take a look at some of his statistics. Again, if we go back to 2019, there's going to be a theme here for several of these players that we look at. A 7.3 WAR. Anytime you're above 7 or up, you're going to be in the MVP conversation. And 122 games played last season, missed some games, 55 out of 60 in the season before that. You're not going to get a ton of power from Betts, 20 to 30 home runs per season, but he's a guy that does a little bit of everything, and it's all about the defense with Mookie Betts especially. If we look at his resume in general, he was the 2018 AL MVP with the Red Sox. He's a 2-time MVP runner-up, and the 2 other times he's been in the top 10 for MVP voting, 4-time All-Star and a 5-time Gold Glove, as well as a 4-time Silver Slugger Award winner. So let's look at these different factors. So historical precedent, Betts, a guy that definitely obviously has had a lot of success, can really perform. World Series probability, plus 500 for the Dodgers, still heavy favorites to win. And injury prone. In general, he's on the field. Again, he has missed some time, not as much as Trout. So overall, rebound probability I've got as a light green. I think it looks really good for Betts. I think he's still got a lot of career ahead of him. And we can jump over and look at Betts card prices like we did for Trout. Again, not a lot of movement on these. Actually, most of his cards down. If we scroll down, you can see, pretty much a lot of them in the red over the last 180 days. So to me, I'm looking at Betts. I like him. I like his career and what he's done so far. He's already over 50 WAR and should keep building onto that as he has many years still to go. So Mookie Betts is another guy who's going to be looking to rebound in 2022. All right, next up, Christian Yelich, obviously for the Milwaukee Brewers. Yelich, who won the 2018 NL MVP and was runner-up in 2019. It was looking like Yelich was, going to be one of the stars of the MLB. He was on the cover of ESPN's The Body magazine, I think, and this is a guy who had the spotlight on him heavily. But for the last couple of years, he's really struggled. Now you can see his card prices down 40% in the last 180 days. People obviously not very high on him. Yahoo preseason ranking just 89, so still top 100, but definitely not top 10 like the other guys. And he finished last year ranked number 280 overall. So he played 117 games last season, 58 the season before, 130. The power, if you look at 2019, Again, in 130 games, he hit 44 home runs. He had a 1.100 OPS with a 7 WAR. Fantastic season. That was when he was the runner-up. If we looked at his 2018 seasons, we'd be just as impressed. Now, looking at projections for this year, you can see the batting average not going to, be in the top of the league with batting average. OPS projected to be up from the last 2 seasons. I think that might be a little bit optimistic, only because I just haven't seen anything in the last 2 years from Yelich that makes me think that he's going to rebound this season. So let's look. Historical precedent, I've got it as orange. Even though he did have 2 incredible seasons, that's pretty much it. It's not like it was a year over year over year over year. And the last 2 seasons, he's been, frankly, not very good at all. World Series probability plus 1,600 for the Brewers. So they are expected to be one of the top, kind of 8 to 10 teams competing for the World Series this year. Injury prone, obviously I've got him as a yellow light here. Again, he has missed some time, not like Trout has, but he has not been able to really put together a full healthy season. So rebound probability in a guy like Yelich, I've got him as an orange, maybe trending more toward a red light. Again, I don't see a reason to be super optimistic that Yelich is going to have a big season. And unless he does that, I think people are going to forget about his card prices and move on to other different players and especially younger prospects who show more upside. Okay, so just 4 cards to look at here in PSA 10 for Christian Yelich over the last 180 days. His Chrome Rookies PSA 10 from Bowman Draft in 2013 is up 30%, but everything else is down. And if you stack up the sales volume here with 138 sales, that's why that card is going to weight more heavily into how his player performance has been overall with his cards. So that's what you see when you see that Yelich is down over 40% overall with his cards in the last 180 days. All right, moving on, number 4 on our list, Francisco Lindor. Obviously Lindor, who made the move with a big contract to the Mets last year from the Cleveland, then Indians, now Guardians. His prices are up 28% in the last 180 days. There's some reason for optimism around Lindor. He's a young guy playing shortstop who, can do a little bit of everything. Obviously, there's a reason that the Mets paid him a ton of money. And last season, he really, really struggled. He did not do well. The Mets ballpark, notoriously a pitcher's park, not a hitter's ballpark. Preseason ranking 37 with Yahoo, final ranking last year 204. And so if we look at his stats this year, we've got 20 home runs from 2021, 10 stolen bases, just an average of 230, which is pretty abysmal, and a WAR of 3.1, OPS around .734. Season before that, honestly, not much better in the season before that. But if we go back to 2019, he did have 101 runs, 32 home runs, generated some power, was driving the ball in, over 20 stolen bases, and almost a 5 WAR for the season in 2019. So this is a guy that's still he has a lot of hype behind him. People have been waiting for him to take that next step to get up to 6 or 7 WAR. We'll see if it happens. Historical precedent I've got as orange. I think there's a lot more, again, hype behind him than there is actually necessarily any substance. World Series probability, got him as a green, plus 1,300 for the Mets this year. Obviously, they're making big moves, signing Max Scherzer, and they're going to be looking to generate some momentum. But there is the news that DeGrom is going to miss even more time again, so remains to be seen what's going to happen with the Mets. Injury prone, I've got him as a light green. It looks like he's playing most of the season. He did miss some time last year, played the full season in 2020, and in 2019 played the majority of the season. Rebound probability I've got as a yellow on Francisco Lindor. Again, much like Yelich, I would expect him to have to be kind of a guy who is going to have to really put up a solid season because there's so many other new players coming up. There are so many superstars, young budding prospects in this league, especially those who haven't even made it into the MLB yet, that in order for anything to happen with Lindor's card prices, some kind of spotlight is going to have to be shown on him, whether that's individual accomplishments or the Mets absolutely tearing it up. And just to recap his resume, he was the Rookie of the Year runner-up back when he was had his rookie season. He was top 10 in MVP voting 3 times, and he has been a 4-time All-Star. So it's not like Lindor hasn't done anything. It's just that he hasn't been at the absolute top of the league in that upper echelon. So let's take a look at Lindor's prices over the last 180 days. And you can see several of these cards. His Heritage Chrome up 76%, which is really nice movement. The Refractor up 76%. And just kind of scrolling down, you can see several cards up, only a couple of them down. His Heritage base card down 21%. So more attractive options with the more flagship cards or the shorter printed serial numbered cards for Lindor. Again, remains to be seen how the Mets are going to do and if Lindor can rebound. All right, number 5 on our list, the last one we'll look at in a kind of a deep dive format here is Alex Bregman for the Houston Astros. His card price is down 11% in the last 180 days. Bregman, who was the AL MVP runner-up back in 2019 and the AL MVP number 5 vote getter in 2018. He's a 2-time All-Star and has a Silver Slugger award. Obviously was a rookie back in 2017. Last year, he finished 345th, definitely had a down season compared to where people were projecting him. This season, pre-rank 74. And if we take a look at his stats, you know, they've got him projected to have somewhat of a mediocre season this year. Just 18 home runs projected, 64 runs, 62 RBIs. Not a lot of positivity projected around Bregman this year. Last year, just 12 home runs. And if you compare that, he only played 91 games. His OPS was just 777. Going back to that 29 season when he was the runner-up for MVP, that's when all the momentum was behind Bregman and behind his card prices. He had 41 home runs. He had an OPS over 1, a WAR of 9, which is whopping for any player in a season, but he just hasn't been able to put it together since then. Now, obviously, the Astros have had incredible success even without him. So if we look at this historical precedent, I've got it as yellow. Maybe that should trend toward orange if I'm being consistent with some of the previous players like Yelich, but I do think that he's a little bit younger and has more opportunity. He showed those early flashes in his career, and sometimes these guys can just turn it around really quickly with some minor adjustments at the plate, their approach, their swing. World Series probability plus 1,000 for the Astros. They're still expected to very much be in the mix. They've got Verlander coming back, so they should be competing. And in terms of injury prone, again, yellow. He missed the time last year. He missed some games in 2020, played almost the full season in 2019, so remains to be seen with Bregman. So rebound probability, I've got him as an orange. No pun intended with the Astros colors, obviously, but I'm not sure what to think of Bregman. If he does turn it back on, his card prices, I would think, would almost certainly start to take off again because it's still so early in his career and because of the 2019 season that he had. But I don't know which version of Bregman we're going to get in the 2022 season. So let's take a look at Bregman's cards, jumping over here. Again, you got his Heritage Real One autograph, PSA 10 up 65%. These Real One autos have been gaining more traction in general. They're spectacular cards, on-card autos, usually pretty short printed. And then we can kind of just scroll down. You can see plus 40% on his short printed refractor variation. And then scrolling down the rest of his cards pretty much in the negative. So Alex Bregman is the last one that I wanted to take a deep dive look at. Now the last thing here is I'm kind of stacking up these players along with a handful of others who maybe we could expect to, come back this season from various things. So I'm just going to scroll down the list and we'll kind of talk briefly about each of these guys. Byron Buxton, card prices up 36% in the last 180 days. If you follow baseball closely, if you've followed it for a while, Buxton, is a guy who's always had a lot of conversation around him. He's freakishly crazy athletic. He's fast, probably one of the fastest guys in the league other than maybe Trey Turner. And if he can put it together, last year, pre-All-Star break, he was absolutely killing it. I think he led the major leagues in OPS before the All-Star break. But again, injuries with a guy like Buxton. That's been the story. When he plays, he's fantastic. It's just a matter of if he actually plays. We've got Lindor, we talked about, and Trout. Ronald Acuna Jr., expected to come back sometime in May. Looking forward to that. Now that I'm down in Atlanta, I can't wait to go and watch some of the Braves games and actually see him in person play. His price is down just 3%. Keep an eye on what happens with his prices over the next month or so. It'll be really interesting to see how much the hype builds with the momentum of him coming back. I threw Anthony Rendon on this list only because he's a guy who in the past obviously was in that MVP conversation. He signed the big contract to move to the Angels, and he hasn't played particularly well since getting that big money. Who knows what's going to happen with him? We talked about Bregman. Bellinger, down 6%. This is a guy of like every other season, it seems like. One season, he has a fantastic season, then he's not very good, then he's back swinging. I know there's been concerns that pitchers have been able to find a hole in his swing at different points in his career, so it really remains to be seen what's going to happen with Bellinger, but the Dodgers, again, should be in contention. Talked about Betts. Kyle Lewis obviously had that great, kind of rookie season, so to speak. put up good numbers. Last year was not particularly good. The thing with Lewis, and I'll talk about this with him and Luis Robert, especially these two guys, there's so many of their cards graded. Like just the volume on them. If you look at this, you see the number of sales in this time frame. 3,058 sales, 4,178 sales. Tatis obviously has a lot of cards, but he's in a different level than those guys right now. It's just, you got to kind of focus when you're looking at those players on cards that are short printed. Don't go for the commodity base cards because there's just too many of them. They're not going to hold their value. There's far too many. Eloy Jimenez obviously had the injury last year, did come back. He's down 17%. Hopefully he can have a big season. I'm not particularly a White Sox fan since I am a Detroit Tigers fan, but the White Sox are a really fun team to watch, and they're obviously the favorites to win that division this year, but don't sleep on my Tigers. And if we scroll down, I talked about Lou Bob. DJ LeMahieu, he obviously won the batting title 2 years ago, and he's a guy who you think would be right in that conversation again. I had him on my fantasy team last year. I think at one point I ended up dropping him. He just was not very good. Can the Yankees rebound and have a nice season again? If so, you got to think LeMahieu is going to be a big part of that. And finally, we rounded out with Tatis. I would say with Fernando Tatis Jr., watch what happens to his card prices because he's going to be out a while, up to 3 months. He had the wrist surgery. And if people forget about him in the midst of everything else, especially if other guys are going crazy like Soto, Acuna, some of the other big names, Vladdy, they might forget about Tatis, and it might be a good time in the next couple of months to try to scoop up some of his stuff before he makes his return. All right, that does it for this week's video. I'm really excited for this baseball season. There are so many incredible young stars emerging year over year. So I want to know, who are you most bullish on this coming season? Is there anyone you think is flying way too far under the radar? Let me know down in the comments. And to those of you who tune in each week, I really sincerely appreciate it. Thanks so much for stopping back again. If this is your first time watching, I would greatly appreciate it if you could like this video, subscribe, and hit that little bell icon so that you'll be notified every time a new video releases. Until next time, happy investing.